Hello and welcome back. Today, I wanted to focus on narcissistic family roles, but specifically the lost child in a narcissistic family system. As a narcissistic abuse survivor, my goal is to help anyone that's undergone these circumstances realize that there is life after narcissistic abuse, that narcissistic abuse does not have to define them and rule the rest of their life. That being said, my name is Michele. I'm a trauma-informed coach and somatic experiencing practitioner. I'm also the founder of the Trauma-Informed Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Coaching Program, which helps people to learn how to do what I did, which is shift from survivor to coach. If coaching is your calling, I'll leave the link there for you to check it out. Okay, so let's talk about this role. Let's talk about the lost child when the lost child grows up. And the reason I want to focus on this is because there's so much information. There's so much information about the scapegoat and about the golden child. But the reality is that a lot of narcissistic parents have more than two children, and they also have roles. And sometimes the lost child, when they grow up, they realize their parents were a narcissist, but none of the roles are kind of resonating with them. And it's because they were neither the scapegoat nor the golden child. So the lost child can sometimes be the last child, but not necessarily. It really depends on the attention of the narcissist, where their attention is going and who's giving them the most supply. So it could be the middle child. It doesn't matter where you are in the scheme of things. What points to the lost child is how they're treated. They're just completely ignored. It could be that the narcissist is getting supply from other children, right? So because the narcissist is getting supply elsewhere, they pay no attention to this lost child. It's kind of like, if you're outside and you have great oxygen, you're not going to try to find another source of oxygen because you have a wonderful source of it. Well, that's kind of the way they are with narcissistic supply. If they are using all of their energy to create drama with the scapegoat and the golden child, then the lost child is just going to be lost in the shuffle. And so the lost child winds up learning by observing what happens in their family system. So they observe that the scapegoat, by being themselves, by trying to assert their own individuality, winds up being punished, shamed, and winds up creating a lot of drama. So they're like, oh, that's dangerous. Being myself is dangerous. And then they watch the golden child and they see that by suppressing and molding themselves to make the parent happy gives them attention. And so by observation, they're like, oh, okay, so making the other people happy is what I need to do. And they quickly learn that with a narcissistic family system, when you're the lost child, one of the things that makes a parent happy, a narcissistic parent happy most, is you not needing anything, not demanding anything, not wanting anything, just kind of being present, but not present. You're there, but you're not there. You're alive, but you feel invisible. And so the lost child is left to kind of fend for themselves. They wind up having to be very independent. They wind up having to take care of themselves, learn to do things that should have been taught to them. They learn about life through watching and trying to figure it out. They wind up learning about themselves, or they think they're learning about themselves and how they should be by watching what other people do. Where what should have happened is they should have been mirrored by their parents. They should have been seen, heard, and cared about so that they could see themselves, so that they could know themselves and create their own self-identity. But because they were ignored, because through neglect, they learned to be independent, they don't have a sense of self. And so they're always looking outside to other people as to how to be, how to think, and how to feel. Oftentimes, something that happens with the lost child is that a narcissistic parent will make them feel like they have to be like another one of their siblings. And so it's almost like the parent kind of glues them together in their own mind. The lost child winds up being like a shadow of one of the other children. And it's really a way of kind of eluding their parenting off to another one of their children to do that. Instead of parenting that lost child, they expect that lost child to learn from that other sibling. And so if this is done from a young age, that child grows up thinking that I need to be attached to someone else. I need to learn from this other person how to be. Because again, the parent's not mirroring them, and they're just gluing them together to another sibling. And so when this lost child grows up, they go through the years with that same template that the narcissistic parent set up in them. They don't have a self, right? They don't know how to see themselves. They only know how to see themselves through the lens of being attached to someone else. And that narcissistic parent never treats that lost child like an individual. It's always in connection to that other sibling. And so they're not treated as a separate, unique, authentic individual. They're treated as an extension, in this case, not of the narcissist, but of one of the other children. And so they grow up feeling like an extension of people. They don't grow up feeling like they can be authentic, like they are an individual, because they were never treated that way. And so here's the amazing thing about our authentic self is that even through that horrible neglect, even through being treated that way, the authentic self, even though we feel like we don't have one, even though we feel like it's dead, it's there. It's still there. And at some point in life, after years of being extensions of friends, extensions of other people, after years of trying to find a caregiver in a relationship, which is sometimes how the lost child enters relationships, hoping to get what they didn't get in childhood, not consciously, but unconsciously. After years of that, eventually the stress of living as an extension of self, the stress of trying to figure life out, the stress of trying to learn who I'm supposed to be and suppressing who I really am, the stress and energy of suppressing who I really am to figure out who I'm supposed to be finally takes its toll. And after years of repeating toxic relationships, the lost child winds up reaching a point where it's almost like the body crashes. The body can't take it anymore. It can't take being forced to be an extension of someone else. It can't take holding down. All that energy of repressing who we really are takes a toll on the body. And we can reach a point where we just feel like we're stuck. We can't go forward. We barely understand what happened in the past. And it can be extremely emotionally overwhelming. So if this resonates with you and you are at that point where you realize that you are so tired of not being allowed to be yourself, or you're so tired of surviving and yet not living, where you feel like the years are passing by and yet you're not present. You almost feel like your life is a movie and you're watching it somewhere from deep within, and your authentic self is really doing that. It's like it's suppressed and watching you live life. And when I say you, I'm talking about your survival self. Your survival brain is living your life and your authentic conscious self is being suppressed. It can be really hard when you get to that point where you realize, I was never treated like a person. I was never allowed to have my own feelings. I was never seen. I was never mirrored. I was never allowed to be an individual. It's hard when you get to that place when you realize so much of what was taken from you. And so here are some tips if this is resonating with you. First, really reaching that place of recognizing, wow, this happened to me, as painful as it can be, is an excellent first step, because we can't change anything until we're consciously aware of it. And a lot of the patterns that lost children wind up creating and recreating and spinning on for a long time are because they were unconscious. So the fact that you are realizing this is a good thing, even though it's painful, but it's important to understand that there is a grieving period that you have to allow yourself, because that was painful. Having someone, a parent, someone that should be there to help you to grow into an adult, having a parent that never did that, and the fact that that was too much for you, and so you had to go into survival mode instead of living life, is painful. And so you have to grieve a lot of that loss. That's a part of the healing journey. I wish we could skip that part because it is painful, but it also allows us to finally see the reality of what we went through, and we can begin changing it. Something else that's important is to realize that if you were never treated as an individual and you were never allowed to have your own authenticity, the process of healing is challenging. Sometimes there's so much focus on your parents toxic, get rid of them or discard them or discard all toxic people. And I'm not saying that's bad advice. But what I am saying is that as you're detoxing yourself from toxic people, remember that healing is what's going on the inside. The toxic people are in your outer world. And yes, you need to clear the soil, so to speak, so that you can grow into the person that you really are. Allow yourself to be that person. But it's also about recreating what was kind of broken on the inside. And that takes time. It takes time. It takes compassion. It takes learning to do something that someone should have done with you, but didn't. And so you need to now help yourself to do it. So there's a lot of learning on how to do that, how to see yourself if no one ever saw you, no one ever mirrored you properly in childhood. And now, as you're on this journey, a lot of it is about reconnecting with self and beginning to see your authenticity. And so that's challenging. One, because it was never done for you, so you don't have anyone to model it after. And two, because the very things that help you to be authentic, that not even help you, that allow you to be authentic, the very things that you want to do to be your authentic self are the very things that your own nervous system has learned through your childhood that causes you pain. And so as you're trying to move forward, your nervous system's like, no, what are you doing? We've survived this far. Why are you changing it? And so your own inner world can feel very chaotic on the inside, almost like you're fighting yourself on this recovery journey. You were fighting the toxic person for a long time, and now you feel like you're fighting yourself. And that can feel like a lot. So I just want to say that so that you prepare. This journey isn't about, oh, I learned this, and now because I learned this, everything is so much better. It does get there. It does get to that better place. But as you're going in that direction, you have to retrain your brain and your body to realize that being better or just being you, being authentic is safe, and that you have permission, and that you don't have to look outside of yourself anymore for permission. You don't have to look outside of yourself anymore to know how you're supposed to be. But that takes time. So be patient with yourself. Something that's very valuable that I found to be helpful with my clients is combining coaching with somatic experiencing, because a lot of that suppression, when you had to suppress your authentic self, well, where did you suppress everything to? Your body. And a lot of unmetabolized trauma stays stuck in the body. When we go to be ourselves, that discomfort that comes on, that's that unmetabolized trauma. And so somatic experiencing is really helpful to be able to work through that. So the journey does take time. It does take time to unlearn what you were taught, the toxic neglect and all that it caused you. It takes time. It takes time to relearn how to be, which sounds frustrating, right? Because a child learns how to be themselves just by being. But if you were the lost child, you didn't get that. So you're learning it as an adult, and it can feel frustrating and unfair, but you have two choices. You can stay frustrated and angry at what happened, which is understandable, but it also keeps you stuck in the coping skills and the survival mode that the narcissistic family system put you in. Or you can start carving that path back to you, back to your authentic self. It's not an overnight process, but it is worth the journey. It really is. And if you need any resources, I'll leave some links here. I'm also the founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is a monthly membership where we meet live every week and we do the inner work together. So you can have your questions answered. There's group coaching. We do EFT, we do trauma release breath work, and we do somatic exercises to help release trauma from the body. So if you're looking for resources, make sure you check that out.